Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about AI. I'm going to talk a little bit about education, a little bit about social media, a little bit about technology. Kind of talk about a broad scope of things here, and ultimately, I guess, kind of touching on some philosophy at the end of the day. So there's a lot of fear out there around artificial intelligence, around social media. There's a lot of belief that these tools are harmful to us, right? And I even see a lot of teachers who are afraid of what these tools are doing to us. You see a lot of these teachers are referencing a lot of children in school who aren't learning very well. They are essentially relying on AI to think for them. And what I want to kind of highlight here is that this isn't new. Okay, so when we talk about outsourcing thinking, what it means to outsource thinking is to be told what to think. Okay, and again, this is nothing new. This is what mainstream media has been doing for decades. This is what TV and radio have been doing for decades. TV and radio have diminished they've diminished the capacity for two-way communication through our adoption or through our choice to use TV and radio. So you're listening to that TV host or the radio host, and you're not conversing with them. You are listening to what they are saying. You are being told what to think. The way to practice how to think is through two-way communication. It is through the discussion, right? It is through conversation with people. And when you are listening to somebody, if you are not constantly pausing the things you're listening to and I guess conversating in your own head about the things you're hearing, then you are just being told what to think. Practicing how to think in an echo chamber or when you don't actually have someone to talk to requires you to sit there and have conversations in your head with yourself. And you can learn that way, but the truth is that you have to have some kind of two-way communication. And ultimately, even our education system diminishes a lot of two-way communication. We listen to the teacher talk at us. We just sit in chairs for 45-minute classes every day for 5 or 6 hours a day in school, and we don't get a lot of one-on-one time with a teacher or even a lot of debate time with other students. When social media came back, when social media was invented, what it actually did was it returned the two-way communication into the educational system. And I'm not talking about a formal educational system. I'm talking about the general education system that you experience as a human being, the whole entire thing, whether it's listening to people, talking to people, whether it's reading books, whether it's spending time in nature, right? So when we get scared about these new technologies, I think we have to look at it from a different angle. These new technologies are actually enabling us to learn how to think again. And they're doing that by kind of returning the two-way communication. And how they're also doing it is by providing nuance and providing a greater diversity of viewpoints, a greater diversity of narrative. So when you go to school for 12 years, and you are locked in this curriculum that is designed by somebody else, by so-called authorities, what is happening is you are getting kind of a distilled version of reality, and you are being kind of blocked off from the other side of that reality. And the other side of that reality is basically whatever is not in that curriculum, right? So again, social media kind of brings back the two-way communication, right? You can talk directly to people. It's not just two-way communication. You can have conversations with hundreds of people at the same time, right? That's very new, right? It's very hard to have a conversation with 100 people in a public square. And obviously, I suppose having a conversation with 100 people in a chat room or on social media is it's not super effective. But the point here is that social media and even AI, even talking to an artificial intelligence model, will give you a greater diversity of information than any distilled curriculum can possibly do, because the distilled curriculum itself is leaving things out, right? In the United States, for example, you don't learn much about perhaps the you don't learn about the nuances of communism. You don't learn about the nuances of socialism because this nation identifies with capitalism. And because of that, well, you get this debate between capitalism and communism that is largely kind of leaning towards capitalism in the United States, whereas other nations they're a lot more nuanced when they discuss these things. So what I want you to realize here is that nature nature's nature is to diversify. Nature chooses the path that maximizes diversity. And if you have a curriculum, if you a school curriculum, if you have a media narrative, or if you have a media system that like mainstream media that is diminishing diversity of information and distilling it into two silos the way that the media in the United States does, nature is naturally going to push against that and overcome it through diversity. And what that means is it's going to seek other pathways by which to learn, okay? And what that ultimately looks like is social media, right? It is AI. If you ask AI, if you prompt AI to give you a nuanced a view about capitalism and socialism, for example, it's going to give you a lot of nuance, and ultimately it's probably going to diminish the division, or diminish the dogma that you will have towards capitalism or socialism. And again, that's just one example. You could apply this to anything. So don't be afraid of these technologies. Use them to diversify the information that goes into your head. Use them to diversify the opinions, the narratives that you are taking in. And what will happen is we will become more intelligent as a species. In coming years, I'm going to make a prediction here, and I'm going to say that there are going to be some young people, very young people, children even, that are going to run circles around the people that we used to think were intelligent, or that we used to think were wise. And my only hope is that the old people get out of their way. My only hope is that the old people don't let their pride overcome those young people's ability to learn. So social media, AI, smartphones, these are just tools, and nature is naturally going to gravitate us towards using these tools to diversify the information input that comes into our heads, because again, that is how nature works. Nature's nature is to diversify, and intelligence is a function of diversity. Intelligence is a function of running around in as much information as possible and finding the biggest patterns possible in that information as you possibly can. And what we have to realize is that ultimately what we are after is diversity and freedom. Okay, so diversity and freedom to take part in that diversity is what creates intelligence and ultimately wisdom. And when you have this democracy and freedom moniker that is so popular in the United States, democracy is ultimately just a system that enables tyranny by the majority. So when you have a majority that votes in a Democrat or Republican majority, and then they use that majority control to control the opposition, you're just diminishing freedom ultimately, right? The control is counter to freedom. So if democracy becomes a tool by which to control your opposition, then democracy and freedom are mutually exclusive from each other. So we don't need democracy and freedom. We need diversity and freedom. And again, that's nature's nature. Nature's nature is to diversify in order to essentially learn more about itself. That's what humans are on this planet. Humans are the species that humans have the most diverse diet of any animal on this planet. And the reason for that is because and the reason we are the most intelligent animal on this planet is because we have the most diverse diet. We intake more nutrients from the world around us, and that translates into a more diverse gut microbiome, and that gut microbiome translates directly into our intelligence. That's what intelligence is. It's probably derived from our gut, in fact, from the diversity of our gut. So, again, we need diversity and freedom. We don't need democracy and freedom. We don't need capitalism. We don't need socialism. We don't need anything that diminishes freedom or diversity. We don't need institutionalized curriculums. Institutionalized curriculums and one-way communication are the death of intelligence. Okay? And again, naturally humans are going to push away from that death of intelligence, and naturally push away from the one-way communication that is so prominent in mainstream media. And we're going to naturally push away from the institutionalized education that is so prominent in the way of thinking that we are, in the way that we structure education systems today. So homeschool your kids, or alternatively, let them go to school, but also teach them the curriculum that opposes the narrative that's being taught in schools, right? Socialize your kids, right? Let them go on social media. Let them talk to people on social media. Let them talk to people in the physical public square, right? We also want to talk to people directly, right? The thing about social media that's interesting, and the internet in general, is that it allows us to communicate with other cultures around the world. And what that's ultimately going to do is kind of create this globalized network, this globalized culture. And people kind of equate that to globalism, and people fear globalism. But it's not that we want one body or one globalist cabal controlling everybody, but what we do want is a globalized culture, because that will diminish all of the intra-species competition, all the intra-species wars that we've been fighting for millennia. And that's what globalization does. Globalization makes us dependent on each other. Globalization is what leads to the Strait of Hormuz affecting the Iran's shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz affecting our gas prices, right? So, in other words, when you bomb Iran, it affects us domestically. And as this mutually assured destruction becomes more prevalent, we're going to realize that this globalization is actually a good thing, and that that this globalization is ultimately going to lead to a globalized culture that unifies around diversity and freedom. So, I want to kind of emphasize the fact that if you allow fear to control your mind, it's going to kill your mind. Okay, fear is the mind killer. This is I don't know who said that quote originally, but when you allow fear to decide how you act, to be the determiner of your actions, what ends up happening is you project all of these pessimistic outcomes or potential outcomes onto the future, and then you respond defensively. And when you respond defensively, you ultimately end up attacking somebody else. The defense mechanisms end up turning into offensive mechanisms, and then again we just feed these vicious cycles of mutually assured destruction. So the cure to this fear is curiosity, and it is curiosity of the narratives that we are not being educated with. In other words, the cure to fear is diversity. The cure to fear is a freedom to explore diversity. And ultimately what that means is we have to reject the institutionalized education. We have to reject the one-way communication. We have to start practicing how to think rather than being told what to think by institutions. So thanks for watching.